I mean, it's not that big of a deal, bro, if it's hard to find a name. As social media scientist Dana Boyd, she avoids capitalizing her name for some reason, has commented, if we're not careful, we're going to develop the psychological equivalent of obesity. We'll find ourselves consuming content that is least beneficial for ourselves or society as a whole. Much of what is on the web is the equivalent of information junk food, so search engines like Google sift the knowledge for the relevant information using clever modeling algorithms. Whenever we look for information, search engines analyze web pages that have been viewed by other users seeking similar information and then rank the most relevant pages for review. It harnesses the power of the crowd to establish what we are looking for. This is wonderful. We can use the collective knowledge of others to mine through the impossible mountain of data to filter out what is not relevant to us. The problem is that filtering excludes information. Every time we surf the web, these search engines are recording what we do and what information we provide about ourselves. It's not evil. It's not spying or an attempt to control our behavior. So you say. The machines are simply trying to provide us with the most relevant information. Now, that's usually what I would say too, but I've been increasingly, and it's not evil, definitely, but there is money in advertising and data selling. So the machines are simply trying to provide us with the most relevant information. Okay, thank you, Google. However, Eli Pariser thinks this is a big problem. In his book, The Filter Bubble, What the Internet is Hiding from You, he explains why search engines are potentially dangerous. Try this out for yourself. Log on to Google and search for information about Egypt. Then call up a relative or friend in a different part of the country and ask him or her to do exactly the same thing. All right, I'll do it and you do it. All right, so of course we got the Google information panel here. Let's go into a little slideshow of photos. Got a little map to the right, flag, how long to get there to Cairo. Under that, we've got the Wikipedia link. We've got people also ask, is it safe to go to Egypt right now? Here are the questions that it says people also ask. Maybe we can compare these. Is it safe to go to Egypt right now? Is Africa or Asia? Where in Egypt did Jesus live? Why is Egypt famous? And then to the right of that first link, we have the About, which is a Google kind of a tourism paragraph. Some details underneath that. Places to visit. Okay, now some top stories. Paradise Lost. Sinai, once teeming with Israeli tourists, is deserted amid Gaza war. Ynet News. IDF confuses Hamas commander with Egyptian journalist on hit list. IDF confuses Hamas commander with Egyptian journalist on hit list. Okay. An extinct branch of the Nile explains the enigmatic location of the Egyptian ... Daily Express. Egypt archaeologists baffled by large mystery anomaly found buried under Giza ... Then we have Britannica. Wow. We have the Britannica link. Some things to do. You can click to see more things to do. And then we have Experience Egypt and a bunch of. And then we have National Geographic Kids. Some travel advice from governments, UK and US. Ancient Egypt Wikipedia page. CNN article, Egypt changed terms of Gaza ceasefire, boba, a Lonely Planet link. All right. You probably didn't even type in Egypt, so I'm sorry, we're wasting your time. Actually, you wasted mine, really. Then call up a relative or a friend in a different part of the country and ask him or her to do exactly the same thing. What Eli noted was that his friends received totally different lists of links. This difference is important because most people only look at the first page of links. In other words, they are not being allowed to see the full picture. I mean, I got bored before even getting near the bottom of that first page. And I've never gotten that far down. I mean, not since I was younger. The reason for this discrepancy is that Google produces a personalized search result tailored for each user by using a filter. According to an unknown engineer from Google to whom Pariser spoke, the filter is based on a profile created from 57 variables known about the user. One wonders if the engineer was pulling Eli's leg given the famous Heinz marketing plot of 57 varieties. Eli noted how personalization was distorting the sorts of information that were being retrieved for him. For example, in an attempt to broaden his view on issues, Eli had deliberately followed conservatives on his Facebook account, even though he mostly had liberal friends. However, after a while, he noticed that the Facebook software was deliberately filtering out the posts from the conservatives because these were deemed less relevant than the majority of his liberal friends. Bro, that's happening to me on Instagram because I don't click like on, some sexist or racist shit, but I want to see it. I want to save it in my list. I want to study it. But Instagram's like, no, 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 no. That doesn't really seem to be what you like. Okay, it's not what I like, but it's what I fucking want to see, please. However, after a while, he noticed that the Facebook software was deliberately filtering out the postings from the conservatives because these were deemed less relevant than the majority of his liberal friends. Filtering software was encapsulating him inside a bubble of ignorance about contrasting views. This was the filter bubble. Section Birds of a Feather, and only 59 minutes left in the book. And we have been reading for longer than I expected. How much more? Because I really want to roll a joint. I'm ready to get some work done. Oh. All right, well, I'm gonna have to roll a joint while we're talking then. Okay, section Birds of a Feather. The vision of being connected to everyone on the web to get a broad perspective on life is false. The software that is necessary for sifting through the impossible volumes of information is only showing us what it thinks we want to see. But we can't blame the software. In real life, we also filter whom we pay attention to. People tend to social network with like-minded individuals who share the same values and opinions and reciprocate communications. We tend to befriend those who are most like us. We tend to read the same newspapers, like the same TV shows, and enjoy the same pastimes. This homophily may lead to increased group cohesion, but it also isolates us from other groups who share different values. For example, in one study on attitudes about global warming, Republicans shifted from 49% who believed the planet was warming up in 2001 to 29% in 2010. Let's read that again for those in the back. For example, in one study on attitudes about global warming, Republicans shifted from 49% who believed the planet was warming up in 2001 to 29% in 2010. In contrast, Democrats increased from 60% to 70% who believed it was a problem over the same period. It was as if they were living on different planets. One might think that the web should counter this tendency of homophily and broaden our minds to different viewpoints. Indeed, Twitter activity encourages total strangers to be connected. If your followers like or dislike what they hear, they can comment or communicate by mentioning you in an open post. That way, you can tell whether anyone is paying attention to you. Twitter users retweet messages and links they like. It's like saying, hey, everybody, look at what this person over here is saying. It's like saying, hey, everybody, look at what this person over here is saying. Thereby spreading the influence from someone they follow to other users not directly connected to them. If you say something influential, it can spread more rapidly across the Twitter sphere than conventional channels. This is how Twitter users were made aware of the top secret U.S. assault on Osama bin Laden's complex as it was happening in May 2011. One Twitter user, Soaib Athar, aka @reallyvirtual, who lived near bin Laden, live tweeted the raid without realizing what was going on. He later tweeted, uh-oh, now I'm the guy who live blogged the Osama raid without knowing it. Prior to the raid, Soaib had 750 people following him. After the raid, he had over 90,000. No wonder Twitter makes surfing blogs and the web look boring and long-winded. You don't even have to be at a computer terminal, as these social networking sites are now all accessible on mobile phones. Twitter is the crack cocaine of social networking. What's Bruce Hood got to say about TikTok? I mean, it's a video. You're getting everything your brain wants. There's something wrong with my watch. It said that it was 8 hours ago. I mean, it was just 8 hours ago now. Why is my watch suddenly 6 hours fast? No way. Ow, wow, that really hurt actually. Um, Despite the ease of Twitter connectivity, it leads to homophily with people of the same age, race, religion, education, and even temperament tending to follow each other and unfollow those with different views. For example, in one study of over 102,000 Twitter users who produced a combined 129 million tweets in 6 months, researchers analyzed their posting on measures of positive or negative content. Upbeat tweets were things like, nothing feels good like a good shower, shave, and haircut. Love it. Or, thanks for your follow. I'm following you back. Great group of amazing people. Those of a more miserable disposition posted tweets such as, she doesn't deserve the tears, but I cry them anyway. Or, I'm sick and my body decides to attack my face and make me break out. What the fuck? I'm sick and my body decides to attack my face and make me break out. What the fuck? When the researchers analyzed the social networking of the group, they found that those who clustered together shared the same dispositions. Happy users are connected to other happy users, and unhappy users are connected to other miserable suds. It was as if there was an emotional contagion between Twitter users, like the mimicry of the mirror system we encountered earlier. Only this time the transfer was entirely virtual. I can't get over how his handle was at really virtual, and he's living near some cave in wherever stand. Okay, no, okay, I accept it. I'm sorry. Okay. Um, It was as if there was emotional contagion between Twitter users, like the mimicry of the mirror system we encountered earlier, only this time the transfer was entirely virtual. Of course, this type of clustering increases polarization. An analysis of 250,000 tweets during the US congressional midterm elections in 2010 revealed that liberals and conservatives significantly retweeted. Fuck, he's got to come out with a version 2 since Trump, QAnon. I mean, a book like this has to come out every like 10 years because the world's changing so much and we're learning stuff. We're seeing how people respond to what we learn and how little they care. I mean, gosh, so much material. And you know what's also great about the other book that we're reading is that it did come out in 2019, right? So it's a few years later. Um, and, so you don't have the insurrection, but you've got the rise of Trump. I don't know whether Chris Neubauer is going to talk about that, but let's see what other books Bruce Hood has written. So he's got the Self-Illusion, of course. He's got the Science of Happiness in 2024. Super Sense. That sounds so familiar. Why We Believe in the Unbelievable, 2009. Science of Superstition, 2010. I guess he worked on some textbooks, like psychology textbooks. Right. Oh, he's Canadian born? Okay. An analysis of 250,000 tweets during the U.S. congressional midterm elections in 2010 revealed that liberals and conservatives significantly retweeted partisan messages consistent with party line, but not those from the opposing camp. See, in the future, just let me chat with you for a second while I roll this. Books, okay. But the trouble with books is it's hard to update them, right? What's great about books is you got a thing with information about a topic. Problem is that information keeps changing. So the great thing about books is that you can localize the information to this thing, but the thing is you can't actually localize it because you need new additions and new updates, blah blah blah. So probably not, maybe not too far from now, there would be quite a few books, available on Kindle where the author does a review every 5 years. Maybe like certain books that are important. The editor makes a deal with the author. Hey, I'm going to check in with you on 10 years. You got to go through the entire book and put notes for anything that's no longer true or any adjustments or whatever. But after that, once we have, I don't know what's going to be called, or even what I'm going to call it, but the SEC database is what we'll call it for right now. And the SEC database, it's a database with a whole bunch of just statements that has sort of been confirmed or people put out there. And you could have like the number of citations next to each statement. And we're talking thousands and thousands of different statements, whether it's anything, many more than, but there's some kind of an algorithm to when one thing is said 2 different ways, it only counts as one sec, or as one kes, maybe. I don't know whether it's gonna be a sec or a kes. I don't know. Anyway, and the SECUS database, the KESIC database. You got the KES, you got different KESs, and their SEC components. KESIC database, and anything you want to know or whatever, like, hey, what's going on? Is the Earth flat? And you can find the KES, the Earth is flat, and all relative information, how often it's cited, what the approval rating is of experts. And then you can also link to the statement, no, the world is not flat, find all the relevant information about that. But it's like a centralized thing. I think there should be a government, maybe. No. Just make it open like Wikipedia, and anybody can adjust it. There's got to be some regulation, I feel like, but also, isn't that what people said about Wikipedia? But also, isn't there some regulation with Wikipedia? But also, it's still the public, though. Yeah, the KESIC database. And then you can there's a centralized place, and you can even see what other maybe KESs people have checked out. You can link, say, okay, yeah, I heard you say this morning. You made this statement this morning, and here it is on the KESIC. Here's what's been said about such a statement. It looks like the research does not support that statement. In fact, it looks like logicians have and psychologists have identified the specific malice involved in forming that statement. So there you go. The KESIC, the KES wiki. Yeah, the KES wiki, the WikiKES, KES wiki, WikiKES. Because you have to name things so that it's just more efficient for being able to think about things. If you have a category, a label for a thought, it's just easier for the organization in the mind, and so then you waste less of the related thoughts because it's like you know exactly what to link it to. Oh, that's that WikiCast thing I was thinking about. I don't. I think that is the number one besides having access to electricity and also just being really committed to the mission and not trying to work a 9 to 5 and all that stuff. But naming my thoughts and the concepts, I think, is besides those kind of major things, maybe even more major than those. I don't know. Probably not. Is me naming concepts is like the most major reason for what I think is I've been very productive in my work efficiency. So you want to hear about this 2010 study? An analysis of 250 tweets during the U.S. congressional midterm elections in 2010 revealed that liberals and conservatives significantly retweeted partisan messages consistent with party line, but not those from the opposing camp. Furthermore, the promise of communication with thousands of users is not fulfilled because of one major stumbling block. Furthermore, the promise of communication with thousands of users is not fulfilled because of one major stumbling block: our evolved human brain, or as we would say, lack of recognition. But I think we're going to be on, it's going to, ça revient au même. When the tweets of 1.7 million users over 6 months were analyzed, the researchers made a remarkable discovery. As the number of followers increase, the capacity to interact with others becomes more difficult in this economy of attention. We cannot have meaningful exchanges with unlimited numbers of people. There simply is not enough time and effort available to respond to everyone. It turns out that within this vast ocean of social networking, the optimum number at which reciprocal communication can be maintained peaks at somewhere between 100 and 200 followers. Likewise, on Facebook, the average user has 130 friends. Does that number seem familiar? It should. It's close to Dunbar's number, which describes the relationship between the primate cortex and social group size. It turns out accurately to predict our social activity in the virtual world of social networking sites as much as the real world. Let's see what it is today. It's gotta be like 500, right? Or maybe like 250. Average Facebook friends. Though the average Facebook user has 338 friends, they only consider 28% of their friends to be genuine or close friends. That's according to Kinsta.com, whatever that is. Now this one says the average Facebook user has 155 friends. Oh, but it has the word yikes in it, so maybe that's not. This one says 229 friends. Yeah, 350. I'm saying 350 a lot, but of course that might all be from ultimately the same source. Anywho, have I rolled the... Oh, I've done it twice. Great, I have 2. Let's throw that one. Let's use this one. It's close to Dunbar's number, which describes the relationship between the primate cortex and social group size. It turns out accurately to predict our social behavior in the virtual world of social networking sites as much as the real world. Section: Time for Ourself. Technology was supposed to liberate us from the mundane chores in life. It was supposed to make us happier. 20th century advertisements promised a world of automaticity and instant gratification. When the computer first came along in the 1960s and then into many Western households during the 1980s and 1990s, we were told that we would have increased freedom to pursue leisure and entertainment. We were supposed to have more time for each other. The computer has certainly made many tasks easier, but paradoxically... Oh, by the way, so just... What were we saying the same thing? No, but also yes. So he said, furthermore, the promise of communication with thousands of users is not fulfilled because of one major stumbling block. So he was saying that our human brains can't handle that. Okay. So no, not what I was saying. What I would say is that our human brains can't really handle communication in general. or don't really benefit from it the way that we could theoretically. We're like halfway there, which is enormous, right? Which means you can tell me, hey, do this, don't do that. And a lot of times I'll get that. But a lot of times I can, but if I say to you, hey, you know that God thing that you're thinking about, you would never like take that idea seriously if it had anything to do with like what's in front of you. It's only because this God thing exists in a realm that you didn't evolve to be able to like reason about, and so you're like, oh, okay. But if I said to you right now, if I made any such claim, you would think it was just a trick. You would think it's bullshit. Like, you don't believe in magic. You don't go to a magic show and be like, holy shit. I'm stealing right now, actually. Because I was gonna refer to him, but then I just kind of ended up doing his own thing. Mark Normand, right? Was it Mark Normand? I don't know. I think it's Mark Normand. Anyway, he has a great bit on on uh, on sort of the odd sort of paradox or the contradiction of someone happily believing that Jesus did magic, but also saying, "Oh no, I don't believe in magic." Um, anyway, but what I was originally trying to say is, yeah, you're right. I was talking to this religious person, trying to have a communication, be like, "Yo, like." You need evidence to believe things. You do, personally. Like, you're talking about faith and stuff, but that doesn't apply in any other sort of realm of your life. Um, you believe things when they are demonstrated, typically. And then you're just not you just are not programmed to use that kind of thinking when you think about God. Uh, and that's sort of why you're believing that. So I've communicated sort of pretty well. That is demonstrated, and I could spend more time on that and communicate that. And if I said something like that, even the best possible version of that, even if it wasn't me, it was someone really good at this, Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, Ricky Gervais, but without being too mean about it. And you could say that to 10,000 religious people, you'd have fewer than 1% that does something for them, right? Okay, so that's what I was saying. And it could do more, if we had recognition, if the listener knew, oh yeah, right. It is possible that I have certain reasoning capacities that only apply to certain situations. And this semantic God thing is just beyond when I naturally sort of engage those reasoning mechanisms. And that's a bit silly. But I am a human brain, and of course I'm not perceiving reality as it is. Blah, blah, blah. Right? I don't really remember what I started with. This drawing is almost done. So that's very exciting. And let's get back to work. We were supposed to have more time for each other. The computer has certainly made many tasks easier, but paradoxically, many of us spend more time alone at our computers than engaging with the people with whom we live and work. My colleague, Simon Baron Cohen, not Sasha, right? Simon Baron Cohen, an expert on autism, has estimated that he answers 50 emails a day and has spent over 1,000 hours a year doing so. I think that my online time is much worse. I don't get as many emails as Simon. Simon's quite famous. But I am online every day and cannot remember the last time I had a day offline. Even on holiday or trips, I am connected. I am not researching articles or preparing teaching material. If I am not researching articles or preparing teaching materials, then I am keeping contact with people through social networking sites. I email, write a blog, tweet on Twitter, talk on Skype, have a LinkedIn profile, and drop in and out of Facebook. I have joined Google Plus, the latest development in social networking, no longer existent. I surf the web relentlessly. I can do this via my office computer, portable laptop, iPad, or smartphone. I am all wired up. Even when I watch some important... Oh, fuck, no! Everybody shut the fuck up. Oh, fuck, I'm getting thigh hairs with it. Let's see how thigh hair smokes. Oh, fuck off. That's so much. Ah, damn it. That's in there. All right. Oh, dog hair. Gosh, that was... Woo! What a... Just let me... Wow. Even when I watch some important events on television, I have my social network feed running so I can keep track of what other people's opinions are of the same broadcast. I estimate that I spend at least half of my waking day online from 7 a.m. to midnight. Oh. From 7 a.m. So that's well over 3,000 hours. I estimate that I spend at least half of my waking day online from 7 a.m. to midnight. It's well over 3,000 hours per year. Excessive by anyone's standards. I know that this level of web presence is not typical and probably not healthy, but if my teenage daughters or anything go by, many people in the West are increasingly becoming immersed in their online involvement. Some argue that excessive dependence on web activity should be considered like any other addiction. Should be considered like any other addiction. What? Where is this? Some argue that excessive dependence on web activity should be considered like any other addiction, although psychiatrists are not in agreement that it really constitutes a well-defined disorder. My addiction to the web began in 2009 when I started my online presence and social networking at the request of the publisher of my first book. Initially, I was asked to write a blog. Oh, yeah. Okay, we got a WordPress. What does this look like? That is not what I have been picturing, okay. Aw. Aw. I love this guy. I feel like he wouldn't. It doesn't matter what I feel like. I'm just looking at pictures of his face. Whatever I'm feeling is just the left brain interpreter needing to come up with something, not giving a shit about reality. Bruce McFarlane Hood. Bruce Hood? No. Oh! Bruce Hood.
Con Revolut Business gestiono mis finanzas fácilmente y mi equipo es muy fácil controlar sus gastos. Pueden hacer una...
We've been so incredibly productive. We've got 49 minutes, it says, left in this book. Not if we slow down again, as we were at the beginning of the book, obviously. But it dropped down to 49 minutes. It must have been 6 hours yesterday. We have also been reading a lot, and I guess that's kind of how time works. Bruce.
How are you so late?
How are you so late?
Today on Let Them Talk TV, you're going to learn how to speak Scottish English, and you'll also learn Scotland. Now, I am this. Scottish poet to you. Yes, indeed. And here he is. It's Jack. Hello, Jack.
Hello, Gideon. Great to see you.
Hello, Bruce Hood.
Jack, first of all, where are you from and how would you describe your accent?
Yes, so I was born in
Aberdeen,
the third city of Scotland.
Aberdeen.
But I grew up on the North Sea coast in a wee town, a little town called Dornoch. The nearest well-known town to Dornoch is Inverness, which is just a north.
I don't feel like it's strong enough for me to like. I bet Bruce Hood. Let's hear Bruce Hood speaking. Isn't that why didn't we do that? The Utes. Bruce Hood. How do they do a double attachment altruism?
Have you ever wanted to add more breathing room to your photos?
Attachment altruism and the self-illusion.
And fill in this tile pattern.
Oh, do you want to say?
I talk about this great episode of Friends where Joey and Phoebe are having an argument. Phoebe was saying that Joey's just being selfish, and he said, "Well, you're really selfish because you went and had your surrogate babies for your brother." And she's
for your brother.
And he says, "Well, look, it made you feel better."
Made you feel.
And she said, "Yes, of course."
Made you feel better.
Said, well, therefore, that makes you selfish.
Well,
so I think that's the kind of the irony of the whole.
I'm sorry, you actually said something kind of profound there.
I talk about this great episode of Friends where Joey and Phoebe are having an argument. Phoebe was claiming that Joey was just being selfish, and he said, "Well, you're really selfish because you went and had your surrogate babies for your brother." And she's dumbfounded, and he says, "Well, look, it made you feel better." And she said, "Yes, of course it did." And he said, "Well, therefore, that makes you selfish." So I think that's the kind of the irony.
Oh, don't you love him?
The thing about altruism is it ever really.
But he doesn't have. I mean, yeah, act. You can hear, but it's not super. So Bruce Hood, I don't know. Okay, let's get to work. Let's get back to work. All right, let's see. It's really so much fun. Very good indeed. Okay. What is this, like an Indian Scotsman with a slight mental retardation? All right, his blog, whatever, we're over it. Initially, I was asked to write a blog, a website where you write stories and hope that people visit and read what you write. From the outset, I thought that blogging was a self-indulgent activity, but I agreed to give it a whirl to help promote my book. In spite of my initial reluctance, I soon became addicted to feedback. Readers would leave comments about each posting, and as an administrator of my site, I could see who and how many people were visiting. It was not enough to post blogs for some unseen audience. I needed the validation from visitors that my efforts and opinions were appreciated. That's why I'm afraid of having followers. Because I have recognition. I know I'm a human brain. And I know that one of my got pink nail polish, wearing a little crop top, living in a van, got a little dreadlock mullet going. So obviously that it isn't like, or it hasn't manifested, much, but it's there. And I think in different conditions, it would manifest a lot stronger. For instance, if I met a bunch of people that were similar to me in some ways, then I would try to become more similar to them, especially if they coincide with my image of what myself is, with my self-illusion. And that can be good in some ways. But also there will be some of my thoughts that we'll be missing out on, or some of the thoughts that I would have had in a different situation, more isolated. Not too isolated, I have access to all these ideas. But I've come up with some pretty, not unique things, but I'm pretty proud of the things that I've come up with. And when I've gone to critical thinking conferences and I see how they just don't get it, how they think that they are reasonable and everybody else who's like anti-vax or whatever are just fools that don't value critical thinking or something. And I go, oh no, y'all haven't gotten that perspective yet that I've gotten. Anyway, I'm sorry. All right. Okay. Look, it's gone up to 52 minutes left in the book. Okay. My addiction to the web began in 2009. Right. My publishers were like, blah, blah, gave it a whirl. I was addicted to feedback. It was not enough to post blogs for some unseen audience. I needed the validation from visitors that my efforts and opinions were appreciated. Because sometimes I'm like, oh man, you work really hard and you're not really bothered. But if I got a taste of, if someone said to me, wow, Aries, you're dedicating your life to working on this stuff, understanding this stuff, you're not getting anything out of it. Oh my gosh, I appreciate it so much. I'd be like, yeah, keep going. And what do you want me to make a video about next? These were recorded as hits, the number of times people visited my site. This feedback process is supercharged by the accelerated nature of communication on the web. Unlike peer-reviewed scientific papers or critics' reviews of your, I'm feeling high, or critics' reviews of your books that can take ages and are unpredictable, social networking sites can create instantaneous gratification from feedback. If the public responds positively to something we have written by increasing traffic or leaving kind comments, this makes us feel very good indeed. It justifies our efforts. That wasn't bad. We know the reason for this pleasure from experiments. We know the reason for this pleasure from experiments on conditioning behavior. Conditioning was originally discovered in the 1890s by Russian psychologist Ivan. Very good. Pavlov, who noted that the dogs he had been studying learned to anticipate feeding time because they would salivate before the food arrived. I say to my dog, tu veux manger? Or I say it in French sometimes or sometimes in English, you want to eat? He then presented the sound of a buzzer, not a bell as popular culture portrays it, I didn't know that, with the food. So then eventually just the sound elicited salivation. The dog has learned to associate the sound with the food. And if it's in the middle of the day, so I remember I was rummaging through his food yesterday, expecting him to react. It was in the middle of the day, and I was like, oh yeah, okay. So there are other things associated. It's not just the sound of the plastic. It's not just me talking about it. That's why he didn't just come now. But there are other conditions as well. Hunger, timing. Me saying that, rustling of plastic. Those are the four sort of things that he's associated eating with. The dog had learned to associate the sound with the food. This was an important discovery. The experimenter could shape the behavior of the dogs to respond to a variety of different stimuli. They could be trained or conditioned by reward. Conditioning was soon developed into a whole school of psychological theory called behaviorism, championed in the United States by individuals like J.B. Watson and B.F. Skinner, who claimed that any complex behavior could be shaped by rewards and punishments. Habiting, bro. In fact, we now know that it is not the rewards that strengthen behaviors, but rather the anticipation of rewards, which is so satisfying. Insula. Let's hear about the insula. This is because deep inside our brain, close to the brainstem, is a reward system that is invigorated by a cluster of around 15,000 to 20,000 dopamine neurons that send out long fibers to other regions of the brain. Nucleus accumbens. The basal forebrain rostral is back. No, to the preoptic area of the hypothalamus. Fuck, I gotta review anatomy. Okay. I have to review anatomy. That's very exciting. We've gotten to a point where, because we've always known enough about the brain, but recently we had to learn more about neurotransmission, and we learned about the discharge zone versus the facilitated zone, and that was relevant to our work with our ideas with the K score. So we corrected what ZIT means to not be how strong the connection is, but how many connections to that neuron or to that id there are. So it's very exciting that our work is getting to the point where the pretty impressive knowledge that we had about the brain before it's no longer sufficient. That's pretty awesome. So this is because deep inside our brain, close to the brain stem, is a reward system that is invigorated by a cluster of around 15,000 to 20,000 dopamine neurons. This and that. When my dad comes, we're going to order... Oh, no. When my mom comes, hopefully she's going to bring my brain model. Okay. My dad comes, we're going to go to... I'm going to try to get him to go to a store with me and buy me another poster that has more cognitive stuff than this one. Okay. So that's something to look forward to that we're going to do, my unseen audience. All right. So, in fact, we know that it is not the rewards that strengthen behaviors, but rather the anticipation of rewards, which is so satisfying. This is because deep inside our brain, close to the brain stem, is a reward system that is invigorated In fact, we now know that it's not the rewards that strengthen behaviors, but rather the anticipation of rewards, which is so satisfying. This is because deep inside our brain, close to the brainstem, is a reward system that is invigorated by a cluster of around 15,000 to 20,000 dopamine neurons that send out long fibers to other regions of the brain. Given the billions Given the billions of neurons in the brain, it is remarkable that this tiny population is the pleasure center critical in controlling our behavior. These neurons enable us to predict and anticipate rewards and punishment. Autrement dit, these neurons predict and anticipate rewards and punishment, or constitute the prediction and anticipation of rewards and punishment systems. Without them, we would be hopelessly inept in decision-making and our behavior would be erratic. When an animal in a conditioning experiment learns that pressing a lever or pecking a disc will deliver a reward, anticipatory dopamine is released, which reinforces the behavior rather than does the actual reward. We know this because rats with electrodes implanted in the pleasure center connected to a current will continue to self-stimulate in the absence of any food reward, to the point of starvation. The dopamine rush alone is sufficient to condition the behavior. When patients have electrodes implanted in this same brain region for the treatment of intractable epilepsy, they report feeling pleasure. Like many addictive behaviors, from gambling to sex, it's the thrill of expectation that gives us the best buzz. What's more, the best way to strengthen... What is this thing called? $15,000 to 20,000 neurons reward. It just goes to his book. Dopaminergic innervation of the forebrain of mammals is constituted, we said the nucleus accumbens is in the forebrain, is constituted by a small number of highly centralized neurons, 15,000 to 20,000. So dopamine anatomy, the discovery of the biosynthetic pathways for catecholamines, including dopamine, noradrenaline, adrenaline, in adrenal medulla chromatin cells, has paved the way for a later discovery of dopamine as a distinct bioactive substance in the brain and other peripheral tissues, 2001. Since then, a great deal, blah, blah. Basic dopamine anatomy, residing in the ventral mesencephalon. And then they innervate the forebrain and basal ganglia. These mesencephalic cell groups are designatable by Broadly, these dopaminergic neurons are functionally involved in higher motor execution and goal-directed behavior. We have to do proper anatomy stuff. Ventral tegmental area, there you go. Substantia nigra, prefrontal cortex, caudate and putamen, ventral striatum, including nuclear accumbens. There we go. Okay. But it all comes from the dopamine is produced in the VTA, or is it in the substantia nigra? No, it's in the VTA. And then they send out long fibers out to the prefrontal cortex, caudate and putamen. And we've got, no, both nuclei start in either this. So are you talking about the substantia nigra? How many neurons in the black substance? 400 to 500,000 dopaminergic cells within each side of the substantia nigra. So I don't know what the 15,000 to 20,000 is. How many neurons in the nucleus accumbens? Okay, major glutamatergic inputs to nucleus accumbens include the prefrontal cortex, glutamate being the excitatory neurotransmitter, blah, 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 and glutamatergic projections from the ventral tegmental area. Output. Okay. Location, cell types. All right, I don't see the answer. Okay. What's more, the best way to strengthen behavior is to only reward it occasionally. This is called intermittent reinforcement. This is because our brains are always seeking out patterns in the environment. Although information and feedback from the environment is often fragmented and incomplete, our brains allow for such inconsistency. When we do something that seems to cause some form of positive reward, we then repeat the action in an attempt to recreate the pleasure. If this reward is not intermittent, we will persist for much longer, repeating our attempts. This is the reinforcement principle behind gambling. We gamble more and for longer periods, just waiting for that occasional reward. If the reward is only intermittent, we will persist for much longer, repeating our attempts. This is the reinforcement principle behind gambling. Same thing for punishment. For like a pet, for instance, if you go that route, if you punish intermittently, well, you don't want them to continue to, because they're not testing. You don't have to mallet the fucking dog. But part of our programming is if we get feedback on something, let's just do it again to make sure, is it that thing then? And if the dog gets intermittent thing, then he hasn't quite figured it out. Again, it's not clear to me. Is it this thing? Is it sometimes I'm getting not sure? I think that's related. Slot machines only need to pay out every so often on an intermittent reinforcement schedule for players to persist in pumping more coins into them. It's that dopamine hit of anticipation that perpetuates our behavior. In the same way, conditioning explains our online behavior. We are compelled to check our emails or look for approval from our online community, just in case something really important or juicy comes along. Every time I checked my email or hit activity on my blog, I was like a rat in one of Skinner's conditioning experiments. At first, the numbers were only a handful, but every week they increased. Within a month, I was checking activity every day, thrilled when there was a peak or a kind comment, depressed by the dips and disparaging remarks. Most days, there was nothing, but every so often I would be rewarded. The dopamine spurt triggered by associated anticipation had become my drug of choice. I gave up crack almost immediately. I'm joking. The dopamine spurt triggered by associated anticipation had become my drug of choice, and I had become a numbers junkie looking for more and more hits. So the internet can become addictive and can also be dangerous, especially in the case of immersive gaming, in which individuals can play for hours in fantasy worlds. In 2010, South Korea had a greater proportion of its population online than any other nation. 81% of 46 million. Most Koreans spend their online time in internet cafes that provide fast but cheap connections. This can have devastating consequences. Many of them develop serious medical conditions related to hours of online activity at the cost of offline inactivity. Their joints swell up, they develop muscular pain. Sometimes it's others that get hurt. That's lame. We do want as many pieces as possible, and labeling would be, I don't know. Do you want labeling? Okay, but then 150 euros. Well, what about this one with the 31 pieces? That's 27 euros. €165. I just want to see what's inside. Fuck, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. $264. Jesus. All right. We need to put a filter. We don't need to be saying that. We had a store. All right, give me 2 seconds. All right, I'm gonna talk to you about something. You can't tell anybody that I said this, and you gotta yourself pretend that I did not say this. And like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna play a clip of something I said when I was about Echo 26 Golf 1452. Fuck it, we're buying it on my dad's account, even though we're hoping this year to log out of his account here. But it's $12.99. Was it only $12.99? Yeah, $12.99. The print list price $35. You save 63%. Look at that. So very exciting. And that's great. Oh, I'm in the Kindle. Okay. X. Back. Okay, so that's downloading, and we'll see what kind of images that offers. Okay. So, we're in South Korea. It's 2010. 81% of us are online, right? That's out of the 46 million of us. Our joints are swelling up. They develop muscular pain. Sometimes it's others that get hurt. In the same year, a South Korean couple who met online married in real life, but unfortunately had a sickly premature baby. Okay. Many of them develop serious medical conditions related to hours of online activity at the cost of offline inactivity. Their joints swell up. They develop muscular pain. Sometimes it's others that get hurt. In the same year, a South Korean couple who met online married in real life, but unfortunately had a sickly premature baby. But then they decided to continue their lives online in the cafe across the road in a game in which they raised a virtual baby. They only returned to the house once a day to feed their own real baby. This lack of care meant that their own child eventually died of severe dehydration and malnutrition. Undoubtedly, this is an extreme case, and many children raised in poverty are neglected, but it highlights the compulsion of the web. I recently hosted a highly educated academic family visiting from the United States, and after the initial social conversation and exchange of anecdotes over dinner, we soon dispersed to check our email, Facebook, and other online lives. It was not only the adults in the group, but the children as well. At one point, I looked up from my laptop and saw everyone else in the room silently immersed in their own web. Whereas we once used to compartmentalize our lives into the working day and time with the family, the web has destroyed those boundaries forever. Most of us are connected, and we like it that way. Just like drug addiction, many of us get withdrawal symptoms of anxiety and irritability when we are denied our web access. We have become shaped and controlled by our technology in a way predicted by Marshall McLuhan when he introduced phrases such as the global village. Yo, Eris just came up with that not 5 minutes ago, thanks to what June Cohen was saying. And the medium is the message. All right, Marshall McLuhan, when he introduced phrases such as the global village and the medium is the message. Even in the 1960s, before the invention of the web, McLuhan predicted that society would change to become dependent and shaped by our communications technology. He understood that we extend ourselves out to others, and in doing so, become influenced by their reciprocal extensions. To this extent, we are intricately interrelated to each other through the mediums by which we communicate. Likewise, Sherry Turkle, the MIT sociologist, has also described this shift from face-to-face interaction to terminal interaction in her recent book, Alone Together. As we spend more time online, we are necessarily less offline, which means that we will cease to live the same lives shaped by our immediate others. Rather, who we are will increasingly become shaped by the mediums in which we exist. Some people find this scary. For many, it is liberating. Section: We all want a second life. What do you do if you are unemployed, overweight, and living off benefits with no prospect of escaping the poverty trap? Since 2003, there has been another world you can live in, a world where you can get a second chance. This is Second Life, a virtual online world where you reinvent yourself and live a life among other avatars who never grow old, have perfect bodies, never get ill, have fabulous homes, and lead interesting lives. David Pollard and Amy Taylor are two individuals who separately wanted to escape the dreariness of their mundane lives. Both of them lived in Newquay, a seaside resort in southwest England that has become a mecca for drunken teenagers who come in their hordes to party away the summer. The town is far from idyllic, and I would imagine living there without a job and prospects must be depressing. To escape the drudgery, David and Amy, who initially met in an online chat room, joined Second Life, where they became Dave Barmy and Laura Skye. See figure 8.1. It's the best I can do for you. Oop. Just accidentally flipped to figure 8.2. I don't think you're supposed to see that there. Dave Barmy was in his mid-20s, 6'4", slim, with long dark hair, and was a nightclub owner who lived in a sprawling villa. He had a penchant for smart suits and bling. In reality, David Pollard was 40, overweight at 160 kilograms. It's like 300 pounds. £352, balding and living off workers' compensation benefits in a small apartment. He wore t-shirts and sweatpants. Laura Skye was an equally exotic character. She was also in her mid-20s, a slim 6 foot with long dark hair, living in a large house. She liked the country and western look of tight denim blouses, and boots. In reality, Amy Pollard was an overweight, 5 foot redhead who was also living off benefits. The contrast between reality and fiction could hardly have been greater. Now it's time to see figure 8.2. Okay, we laugh at the fat people. God, when are we gonna move on? When the couple met online as David Barmy and Laura Skye, they fell in love and married in Second Life. But they also met up in real life, with Amy moving in with David in Newquay. After 2 years, they married for real, just like the Korean couple. However, as in real life, that's when things started to go wrong. Laura, Amy, suspected Dave was playing around in Second Life, so she hired a virtual detective to check up on her virtual husband. At one point, she discovered Dave Barmy having sex with a call girl in the game. In real life, David apologized and begged for forgiveness. The final straw came when Amy caught her real husband in front of the computer in their small flat, watching his avatar cuddling affectionately on a couch with another Second Life character. Modesty McDonnell, the creation of Linda Brinkley, a 55-year-old twice divorcee from Arkansas in the United States. Amy was devastated. She filed for divorce on the grounds of unreasonable behavior, even though Dave had not actually had sex or an affair in real life. Soon after, Dave proposed to Modesty online and in real life, even though the couple had never met. We're not passing judgment because, context, bro. When the world discovered that a couple was divorcing on the grounds of make-believe unreasonable behavior, the press flocked to Newquay. The press flocked to Newquay. However, in what can only be described as reality imitating art. However, in what can only be described as reality imitating art, imitating reality, the Cornish couple initially declined to give interviews and would not answer the door. Then something very odd happened. 2 enterprising journalists from the Southwest News hit on the bright idea of going into Second Life to secure an interview. From their offices miles away in Bristol, Joe Pickering and Paul Attic created virtual ace reporters, Maggie Palsy and Jashley Goffley, to seek out Dave Barmy and Laura Skye for an interview. Joe still works on Southwest News, and she told me that she got the idea after speaking to a colleague who had been using avatars to attend online courses. As Maggie Pulse, Joe found Laura Skye in Second Life. She told me that the online Laura Skye was much more approachable and confident than the real-life Amy. Eventually, Maggie Pulse persuaded Amy to log off, go downstairs, and open the door to speak to the reporters camped on her doorstep. They eventually got their story. I thought they're just going to do the interview on Second Life. Okay, I see. Joe explained that Amy had felt that the betrayal online was far worse than betrayal in real life, because both she and David had created these perfect selves, and still that was not good enough. In real life, we're all flawed and often put up with each other's weaknesses. But in Second Life, there were supposed to be no weaknesses. That's why the online betrayal hurt. As Joe says, she had created this perfect version of herself, and even that wasn't good enough for him. I asked Joe about what finally happened to the couple. Apparently, Dave did eventually meet up with Linda Brinkley, but reality must have kicked in when it came to having a real marriage, when you are both poor and live on different continents. When online Dave Barmy met online Modesty McDonald for real, David Pollard and Linda Brinkley got real. What this morality tale tells us... when online David Barmy met online Modesty McDonald for real, David Pollard and Linda Brinkley got real. What this morality tale tells us is that the boundaries between reality and fantasy can sometimes become blurred. We don't see... whatever. Paul Bloom tells of a research assistant who was asked by her professor to do some research on these virtual communities. Apparently, the young woman never came back. Like some electronic cult, she preferred life in a virtual world compared to the real one. If the urge to live a life online is so compelling, it does make you wonder what the future holds. Surely something has to give, as one cannot be in two places at the same time, even between virtual and real worlds. Both require the limited resource of time, and that is something that cannot be easily divided. Section: When online behavior is off. Some individuals in power seek out sexual gratification by engaging in risky encounters. They step over the boundaries of decent behavior. The web has made this type of transgression all too easy. With what must be the most unfortunate of surnames, U.S. Republican Congressman Anthony Weiner found himself at the center of a career-destroying scandal in 2011 when he was forced to resign after confessing to sending pictures of his penis to women whom he followed on Twitter. Wienergate, as it became known, was just another example of high-profile men using the web to send naked images of themselves to women. In the past, men exposed themselves for sexual gratifications in public places, but with the advent of social networking sites, offline flashing has moved online and is much more common. Indeed, some argue that one of the main uses of the internet is for sex. A 2008 survey of more than 1,280 teenagers, 13 to 20 years old, and young adults, 20 to 26 years, revealed that 1 in 5 teenagers and 1 in 3 young adults has sent nude or semi-nude photographs of themselves over the internet. One online dating site, friendfinder.com, estimates that nearly half of its subscribers are married. Either they are looking for new partners or the opportunity to flirt. Probably one of the most remarkable cases was U.S. Army Colonel Qasem Saleh, who had simultaneously wooed over 50 women online and made marriage proposals to many of them, despite the fact that he was already married. Sexting is a relatively new phenomenon in which individuals use technology to engage in sexual activities at a distance. Susan Lipkins, a psychologist from Port Washington, New York, reports that in her online survey of 13 to 72-year-olds, 2/3 of the sample had sent sexually explicit messages. The peak activity was in the late teenagers and young adults. What was interesting was that this behavior was associated with personality measures of power such as assertiveness, dominance, and aggression in those over the age of 27. Power was not a factor in the younger group, but was significantly related to sexting in the older men. The ease and speed of the web, as well as the perceived dissociation and distance from reality, lead to an escalation of brazen activity. This can easily slide into moral indiscretions that are unregulated by social norms when compared to real life. Just like bullying, the apparent anonymity, distance, and remoteness of being online allows us to not be ourselves as we would behave in the real world. Section: The Cyber Rape by Mr. Bungle the Clown. So we're just going to finish the book today. It's 27 minutes left. Let's go. I'm so fucking thirsty. I'm so thirsty. Okay, you're eager to hear about this cyber rape by Mr. Bungle the Clown. When it comes to the boundaries between reality and fantasy, and between moral and immoral acts, probably the most poignant tale that reveals the blurring in these situations is the story of Mr. Bungle the Clown. Mr. Bungle was a cyber character who inhabited the virtual world of Lambda Mu, one of the first online communities back in the early 1990s, where multiple players create and control virtual characters. I've been thinking more aloud. I found myself yesterday talking to myself out loud quite a bit, or reacting to things as if someone else was there. It's got to be because we've been doing so much of this. It also must be why I'm been so thirsty. Also, not been eating. One of the first online communities back in the early 1990s, where multiple players create and control virtual characters. Lambda Mu. Mr. Bungle was a particularly nasty piece of work. In one notorious event one evening in a virtual room in a virtual mansion, he violated members of his fellow online community using software subroutines, sections of code designed for a particular task in computer programming, to make the other characters perform perverted sexual acts. You know what I'm saying? You know, I've always thought, I gotta learn about computers, gotta get in computers. You know what? Fuck it. I've got my specialty. I'm going to work on that. I do have to learn about computers as they relate to how we can understand cognitive processes, of course. But, you know, I would read something like that. I'd just be like so mad at myself that I don't really know what that means. Or at all, maybe. Or at all. Of course, this terrifying vision of Mr. Bungle was all in the user's mind. He didn't really exist. If you logged on to Lambda Mu back in these early days of virtual communities, you simply accessed a database stored somewhere inside a Xerox Corporation research computer in Silicon Valley that presented the user with scrolling lines of description. Where's that heat? What the fuck was that? Oh my gosh, what was that? Well, that was a hot ass breeze, bro. Alright. Of course, this terrifying vision of Mr. Bungle was all in the user's mind. He didn't really exist. I don't know what that means. There wasn't like a guy who had a profile. If you logged on to Lambda Mu back in these early days of virtual communities, you simply accessed the database stored somewhere inside a Xerox Corporation research computer in Silicon Valley that presented the user with scrolling lines of description. The environment, objects, and all the characters were just subroutines of text. Oh, right, okay. Oh, so there's no visual. I mean, it's visualized in their minds. I see. I gotcha. This terrifying vision of Mr. Bungle was all in the user's mind. It wasn't on the screen because it was just text on the screen. Gotcha. The environment, objects, and all the characters were just subroutines of text. Fairly basic stuff compared to the rich visual environments that are expected in today's technologically advanced online communities. Lambda Mu was nothing compared to the graphical 3D visual worlds of Second Life or World of Warcraft. And is Minecraft one of these? But then human imagination doesn't require much to generate a vivid impression. Mr. Bungle was the disturbed creation. Bro, if you can see something, if your brain is capable of processing visual information in real time, it is capable of having visual, rich, vivid, no, not necessarily, but kind of. You just need to add in. So I'm looking at this door. I'm experiencing this door now. Okay, now I'm also experiencing the door. I'm looking at the door right now in my mind's eye. A little bit of memory, a little bit of just being able to replay maybe recent visual activity. It's not like a consciousness thing, right? It's just that biologically the networks are such that this can somehow be happening, this activity, even though I can only see the door in my periphery. Oh, that does actually, no, it doesn't change it. Yeah, so there's the door, and I'm still replaying that activity. I'm seeing that holder. Okay. So I just don't want you to be like, oh yeah, humans have this thing called imagination. I mean, and then also imagination then to be able to some visual activity and some other visual activity to be co-living such that the sum is now new activity or parts of some visual activity, parts of other activity. And now we have what you might call imagination, because I am seeing something in my mind's eye that I hadn't actually seen, but I took some of the different visual information and it co-livered to produce this new thing. Mr. Bungle was the disturbed creation of a young hacker logging on from New York University. He had managed to hack the system software. Oh God! All over my lip. Mr. Bungle was the disturbed creation of a young hacker logging on from New York University. He had managed to hack the system software to produce a subroutine that presented other users with unsolicited text. During the event in question, several female users were online when they were presented with text describing how their characters inserted various utensils and derived sexual pleasure as how their characters inserted various utensils and derived sexual pleasure as Mr. Bungle watched, laughing sadistically. Again, it was all in the mind. The whole attack was played out as a series of scrolling text. Afterwards, one female user from Seattle, whose character called Legba had been virtually abused, publicly posted her assault on the Lambda Moose community chat board and called for Mr. Bungle's castration. Months later, she told the reporter who had first covered the story that as she wrote those words, post-traumatic tears were streaming down her face. Clearly, this was no longer a virtual incident in her mind. As a victim, she had taken it to heart. The assault had crossed the boundary of imagination to affect the real-life emotions of those concerned. They say words can never harm you, but for the self-illusion, words from other people can be everything. The case of Mr. Bungle raises so many interesting issues about identity, the self, and the way these operate in online communities. Right? And so if you don't want to engage with this, if you're like, oh, they were just a bunch of weirdos, and you're with your representativistic kind of, you imagine an unreliable character who is not an unrepresentative character who is representative of this description, but unrepresentative of people in general, and you dismiss it. And what do we say to that since yesterday? Shut the fuck up. Very good. They say words can never harm you, but for the self-illusion, words from other people can be everything. The case of Mr. Bungle raises so many interesting issues about identity, the self, and the way these operate in online communities. Everything that happened, the characters, the assault, the reaction, and the eventual retribution were nothing more than words, the frenetic typing of cyber geeks on their keyboards. But why the outrage? Why did people feel emotionally upset? No physical contact had ever taken place. Clearly, the players were not deluded into believing that a real assault had happened, but psychologically, the users felt violated. In the minds of the players, it had gone beyond role-playing. Their indignation was real. Ostracism and the pain of social rejection can be so easily triggered by simple computer simulations of communities that are Ostracism and the pain of social rejection can be so easily triggered by simple computer simulations of communities that are a sufficient substitute for reality. Ostracism and the pain of social rejection can be so easily triggered by simple computer simulations of communities that are a sufficient substitute for reality. That's because they stimulate our deep-seated need for social interaction. So where's the real self in these different examples of online communities and virtual worlds? Most of us believe that we are not hypocrites or duplicitous. We like to think we have integrity. And what do we say? Shut the fuck up. Good. If the self is a coherent, integrated entity, and what do we say? Shut the fuck up. It isn't. Then one would predict, but we already told that person to shut the fuck up, so hopefully they won't, that the way we behave online should accurately mirror the way we behave offline. However, that does not appear to be the case. How people behave depends on the context in which they find themselves. The web is no different. The way you behave online would never be acceptable offline and vice versa. Online, you have to be open, engaging, and willing to share, but then you are more likely to tell others what you think of them, flirt, and generally act in a way that would get you into trouble in real life. This guy, he looks, and he didn't sound like, I didn't see him as a square. I saw him as a much older man, but who didn't have an editor. But now that I've seen his face, I just see him as such a square, and I'm reinterpreting so many other things that he said that have been like, where it seemed like he was just like taking for granted that like violations of convention were immoral, or not that he actually believes that, but he was taking for granted as like the status quo truth, even though I bet if you talk to him, he'd be like, oh no, I don't actually like think that, but doesn't everybody though? Anyway, I bet he'd be somebody with a wild online life, absolutely wild. He seems quite repressed. All right, I don't know why I'm saying this stuff. I'm sorry. Okay, and I'm sorry, Bruce. I don't know, Dr. Hood. Excuse me. I'm sorry, Dr. Hood. Look at me, getting familiar with you, someone who I never had the chance to actually meet in real life. I got to look at you talk. I'm reading your book. I feel like we're best buds. That's why I'm teasing, kind of. Okay. The editor thing, though. Yeah, I mean, it's a tease. It's not a big deal, but also, like, what happened? The web is no different. The way you behave online would never be acceptable offline. And by the way you behave online, I don't know what you're talking about. Anyway. And then online you have to be open, engaging, and willing to share. But then you are more likely to tell others what you think of them, flirt, and generally act in a way that would get you into trouble in real life. Sometimes we surprise ourselves in the way we behave online as if we have become a different person. Maybe this is why online life is so popular. We get to be a different self. We get to be someone else, maybe someone we aspire to be. At the very least, we get to interact with others who are missing in our daily lives. This need for an online identity that seems so different to our offline self perplexes pre-web adults. But we need to understand how this need for technological escapism has become integrated into human psychological development. Because the web will eventually swallow up everyone on the planet, it is important to consider how it may influence and change the next generation. We are not likely to become like the Borg, but we do seem to shift effortlessly between our online and offline selves. Consequently, the web dramatically reveals the extent to which the notion of a core self is an illusion. It says 18 minutes left in the book, bro. Chapter 9, why you can't see yourself in reflection. Let's see that's the last chapter, and then this will be the fastest I've ever read a book. Yep, and then it's the notes. Holy smokes. Are you ready to do this? 289 and 295. Oh my god. Oh my goodness. Okie dokie. So we're going to be doing this. Some dash cam footage. My hard drive with my 2022 dash cam footage is fucked up right now. But I was able to see the files at one point. Maybe I'll be able to figure out a way to work with the hard drive. Or, get lucky and be able to work with the hard drive. And then we're going to be reading together. We got a lot of books on the list. We're just 2 seconds. 2 seconds. Hold on. We're doing, not literally 2 seconds, so that's a lie. We're doing No Self, No Problem, the audiobook version while we drive. And then next, it will be How to Build a Brain, a Neural Architecture for Biological Cognition. Oh wait, this is like in 19 minutes, like what we will be ready to start. So Dad will be here when we do these videos. Should we do Quantum Gods? Creation, Chaos, and the Search for Cosmic Consciousness. Author of the New York Times bestseller, God, the Failed Hypothesis. Forward by Michael Shermer. So with that title, it makes me think, oh no, it's going to be right at my dad's alley. But there's a forward by Michael Shermer. And Michael Shermer, he's not about to be like, oh yeah, quantum consciousness. And everything about this book is like what my dad would like. Very anti-religion and so on. And he would love, oh yeah, search for the cosmic consciousness. Well, that sounds a little bit too hippie and silly to him. But if you phrase it as the individual cognitive quantum consciousness, you're like, very interesting. Yes, that explains the feeling of consciousness. And he has the book, God, the Failed Hypothesis. I don't know whether he's read it. How long is it? And when is this from, actually? Oh, when is this from, actually? Oh, it's going to be an old book, isn't it? Published 2009. I think we already had this conversation. Chapter 1, Belief and Non-Belief in America. Chapter 2, What the Bleep is the Secret. Chapter 3, Pursuing the Tao. The Guru of GUT, Space-Time and Matter, The Great Paradigm Shift, Deism and Darwinism, The Spooky Quantum, The Elements of Matter, Chaos, Complexity and Emergence, Return to Reduction, Ghostbusting the Quantum, Quantum Philosophy, Where Can God Act, God Who Plays Dice, Nothingism. It says 5 hours and 38 minutes to read that book. We're going to be like at a resort. Okay, that's what we'll do next. And then this will, or is that just provocative? I don't know. See, here's the thing. If we read How to Build a Brain, a Neural Architecture for Biological Cognition, we're going to be super inspired with it theory, right? It's probably going to contribute to the future of MapIt and other stuff. So we'll want to work on that stuff. And it'll be too heartbreaking to have someone else who could understand the stuff but just shoots it down every time. So we probably don't want to be working on it theory with Dad around. But of course, we still have to get work done because that's just how it is. We're working hard, bro. So now, if we read The Case Against Reality, subtitle, Why Evolution Hid the Truth from Our Eyes, that's not bad. But I can see us, like, just based on that title and subtitle, or just that title and subtitle, I can see us, like, agreeing on that. Because he has said things like, the brain hides the truth from you, the consciousness. And so I can imagine we think we're about to agree. And I say, no, it's how evolution hid the truth from the brain. The brain doesn't have the truth. We are our brain. There may be some pieces of the truth that exist in peace or so on, but in pretty much no sense of the terms does the brain have the truth and then just send us the juicy stuff or something. And they'll say, of course it is. That is it. That is it. That is it. That is it. Of course it is. That is it. Have you never learned anything about the brain? There are unconscious processes, and then there are conscious processes. Yeah, no, yes, Dad, there are. No, actually, no, they're not conscious processes. There are processes that you could be described as conscious because they are experienced, so they're more maybe globalized or something like that. It's because of quantum entanglement. No, you wouldn't do that. What would he say? Yeah, exactly, Eris. So you've got your unconscious brain systems, and then you've got your conscious brain systems. And so the unconscious brain systems are considering or evaluating a whole bunch of things. And only, do you not know anything about the brain? No, Dad, that's true. Those last words that came out of your mouth, that's true. But it's really about it's kind of about the paradigm or the phrasing of this idea. There's this sort of assumption that the unconscious has access to everything, not just that there's a lot of processes. And then also, I don't think it's as simple or as fixed. I don't know. It's just the image that you're. What image? I'm not giving you an image. I'm using words. I'm talking to you right now. No, but Dad, remember we already talked about how you have to force yourself to have an image, but for me, it's automatic. Yeah. Okay, right. So, all right, maybe there's something that maybe I don't know. And I don't know. There's an image triggered by your phrasing, and that image showed. But maybe you're right. Maybe I'm rejecting. All right, what were we talking about in the first place? Oh boy, son, I don't know. Give me a non-alcoholic beer. All right, hold on, Dad. We're having an interesting conversation. All right, hold on. So, oh well, I've said my piece. I mean, that's what I think. We don't have to keep going back and forth. Clearly there's a feeling of consciousness, and there are some quantum potential explanations for that. And even this book here, it says the case against reality, why evolution programmed a brain to hide the truth from our eyes. Can you open that for me? Okay. We're not going to read that next. Now, let's act out. No, I'm exhausted. But quantum gods, creation, chaos, and the search for cosmic consciousness. But the thing is, if we read that, we can't rub it in his face. Can't. Did you hear that, Dad? How the fuck are we going to do that? Because we talk about it while we read, and we talk about my dad. All right, what are the other options? On being certain, believing you are right when you're not. Let's try. I think we're gonna try quantum. No, actually, in fact, the only reason I want to read that is because I have my dad's skepticism eating away at me. This isn't even a part of my work. Quantum gods, the whole idea of consciousness. Oh, but were those chapters super interesting? What were they again? Yeah, I'm not sure that this is actually such an important read right now. All right, what about neuroscience and critical thinking? This is the neuroscience of belief and perception, memory and error, on reality, arguments and logical fallacies, on marketing, media, and other mind games, conspiracy theories demystified. All right, let's do that next, eh? What do you think? Let's do that next. Let's do that next. Oh, that's got audio. All right, we'll do that via audio. And then what are we going to do not audio? Oh, the case against reality, that's audio as well. I wouldn't dare. How Evolution Gave Us Free Will, Free Agents. That's the book he would read. That'd be very provocative to read that in front of me. We'll do On Being Certain, believing you're right when you are not. We'll do that, okay? Does that work? Does that work? Good. Okay, you guys ready to finish the self-illusion? Okay. Why you can't, chapter 9, why you can't see yourself in reflection. When I was a graduate student working on visual development in very young babies some 20 years ago, I studied how they move their eyes. Echo 26 Golf 1534. All right, ready to do this? Let's go. When I was a graduate student working on visual development in very young babies some 20 years ago, I studied how they move their eyes. Babies don't speak, but their eyes are windows into their brain. Where they look and for how long reveals what their brain is paying attention to. Where is the self in this decision? If you think about it, for the most part, we do this unconsciously. But who is moving our eyes? Who decides? Does a newborn have a self in control? Working with newborn babies, sometimes only minutes old, I never really asked this sort of question. I was more concerned with what newborn babies looked at. It seemed obvious to me that babies look at things that they can see most clearly and that this is determined by what is out there in the world to look at. As far as I was concerned, it seemed unlikely that they had models of the world already encoded in their brains that predicted where they would look next. Rather, at the very beginning, everything must be driven by what existed already in the environment to be seen. It is the properties of the external world that compete for the attention of the eye movement systems in the baby's brain. There was no need for a self in control. Newborns don't really make decisions about where to look. Rather, the brain mechanisms they are born with have evolved to seek out information from the external world and then keep a record of those experiences. It was this very early insight into the mind of an infant that opened my eyes to the self-illusion. And you can find somewhere in lots of my videos the elements that open my eyes. As the brain develops, it builds up more complex models of the world, expectations about where and what should happen. We develop an increasing flexibility to apply those models to understand and make predictions. 20 years ago, I appreciated that development was the integration of internal mechanisms working in conjunction with information in the world. That fundamental principle works all the way up the nervous system, from simple eye movements to the full repertoire of human thoughts and behaviors, the same activities that give rise to the self. This is why the self is an illusion. It does not suddenly manifest one day inside our head on our second or third birthday. Or as I often say, in our species, nobody just put in a little, a thing in there. No. The same, you just follow the line. There's little cells like this, a little more complicated, a little more complicated, a little more complicated, and many more and more connections and blah, blah, blah. It did not suddenly manifest one day inside our head on our second or third birthday. It has been slowly emerging, sculpted out of the richness of human activity and interaction. Our self is a product of our mind, which is in turn a product of our brain working in conjunction with other brains. As the brain develops, so does the self. As the brain deteriorates, then so must the self. Why did we evolve the self illusion? Like every other illusion our brain generates, it serves a useful purpose. If you think about the I and the me that we usually refer to as the self, it provides a focal point to hang experiences together, both in the immediate here and now, as well as to join those events over a lifetime. Experiences are fragmented episodes unless they are woven together in a meaningful narrative. This is why the self pulls it all together. Without a focus, the massive parallel processing in our brain means that we would be overwhelmed by the sheer volume of computations if we ever had to deal with them individually. Rather, we get a summarized headline. Dad'd be like, yeah, exactly. Bruce, Dr. Ed, I don't like that you say we get a summarized headline. Like, we get glimpses of a kind of contrived story. Like, yes, okay, but also I think I've explained why it shows. Rather, we get a summarized headline that relates all the outputs from these unconscious processes. Sometimes we can delve into the details of the story a little more closely if we scrutinize the content, but very often much of it is hidden from us. Yes and no, Dr. Hood. Here, we should talk. It's like you got it, but I just need to help you with one thing. I just got 1 a.m. for you, which is to use language differently and just not ever use language like that. Because it's just too neat, this idea of, and then like this summary is sent over to this discrete fixed us. I don't think it's really about sending a summary so much as just, well, I've explained what I think. Okay, the self-illusion depends on stored information that has been acquired during a lifetime. These are our memories that are constructed as we interpret the world. That interpretation is guided by mechanisms that seek out certain information in the world, but also by those around us who help us to make sense of it all. In this way, we are continually shaped by those around us. As the species with the longest proportion of life spent as juveniles dependent on others, human children are particularly evolved for social interaction, and much of what our brains compute appears to be dedicated to socially relevant information. In the absence of social interaction early in development, children can be permanently socially disabled even though their intellect may be intact. Certainly, the formative years leave a legacy of how we interact with others for the rest of our lives. It is through this social interaction with others that we construct our sense of identity and ultimately our sense of self. We have not evolved to think about others as a bundle of processes. Rather, we have evolved to treat others as individual selves. It is faster, more economical, and more efficient to treat others as a self rather than as an extended collection of past histories, hidden agendas, unresolved conflicts, and ulterior motives. Yo, why'd you have to put all that weird baggage stuff? There's a whole bunch of other neutral stuff you could have named. Treating humans as selves optimizes our interactions. We fall in love and hate individuals, not collections. We cannot abandon our moralities simply because we decompose the individual self into its myriad of influences. Punishment and praise is heaped on the individual, not on the multitude of others who shaped the self. Those who reject the notion of a self in control of destiny lead sadder, less satisfying lives. Those who embrace the self-illusion feel fulfilled and purposeful. I don't think it has to be that way. Are you like saying that that's what people say, or are you saying that? Why is it so difficult to see through the illusion? The answer may have something to do with reflections in one form or another that have popped up throughout this book. Think back over all the examples. Babies and animals recognizing themselves in mirrors. Brain-damaged adults with mirror misidentification. Mirroring behavior of others. Mirror touch synesthesia, in which some actually feel others' pain. Mirror neurons that map one mind directly onto another. Not stealing candy or cheating when there is a mirror in the room. Guards wearing mirror shades to dehumanize prisoners. Looking in the mirror for self-affirmation. What is it about a mirror that is... Neil, quiet. Come here. Hello.
Do you know, is there also a toilet building here?
No, I don't think so.
Do you have to, how do you call it? On the campsite or
No, this is free.
just free?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's electricity.
Yeah, okay. I speak Engels.
What's that?
You're speaking Dutch. English.
Yeah.
English.
Yeah. Neil, quiet. Neil, quiet. Neil, quiet.
We can also put our pen. Do you know that? Or?
Yeah, I think you can.
It's no problem.
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody. I don't think there's anybody really looking or monitoring or anything.
Oh, yeah, in the cafe they said,
Yeah. And I guess I think maybe the spots are the same size. But anyway, yeah. Oh, you're gonna put it down there?
Yeah,
You don't need to plug into the outlet for anything? Okay.
just for one night. No problem.
Okay. Very good. All right, come here, buddy.
I can charge my battery.
Yeah, exactly. Or if you don't want to leave something out in the sun, you can give it to me and I can charge it inside. I have a lot of outlets inside. So. Neil, gentle, buddy. Good boy. All right, well, just knock if you want to charge something inside. Just knock if you want to charge something inside.
Okay.
Oh, actually, no. He's not going to be used to you guys coming up. So holler out. My name's Eris. Eris. Yeah, very good. What is it about a mirror that is so central to the notion of the self? When we look at the mirror, we see the outward appearance of our self, but we believe that the image is simply the outer shell of the body we occupy. I respond to that. I didn't know that that's how people felt. I think I've always seen myself as this face until recently. We believe there is so much more to ourself on the inside. This is what we feel and know. Others cannot have access to this inner self. But what if we got it the wrong way around? What if we are a looking glass self that is created by the environment about us, an environment that is predominantly populated by others? Consider all the different influences that there have been. I don't mean others like the other. Consider all the different influences that there have been on your life up to this point in time, from your parents, your schooling, your hobbies, your first adult relationships, your spouse, your children, your job, your colleagues, and your political views, to every other sphere of influence that has touched your life. Imagine how they have impressed upon you. Like the illusory square we saw in the prologue of this book, and I'd say where it's. Or sometimes it's like a triangle, but anyway, you have surrounding shapes, and the cutout is a shape, and so that shape isn't actually there, but it's just the absence of. Oh, so like this. That's really great. Dr. Hood, well, whatever my validation counts for, you got it. That's great. Like the illusory square we saw in the prologue of this book, our self is constructed just like the imaginary white circle you can plainly see in Figure 9.1. Figure 9.1, the self-illusion is an emergent property from the cluster of external influences, not an emergent phenomenon. You only exist as a pattern made up of all the other things in your life that shape you. If you take each away, you would eventually cease to exist. This does not mean that you do not exist at all, but rather that you exist as a combination of all the others who complete your sense of self. These are the memories and experiences that shape you. The problem, as we have seen, however, is that these memories are not always that reliable, and so the self that is constructed is not necessarily an accurate or consistent version. It is continually shifting and reshaping as the contexts change. We are so willing to accommodate others that we adapt to each role in a continuous, dynamic, shape-shifting ballet. This visual metaphor also makes a fundamental point about the nature of reality and delusion. The shape of you may be an illusion, but our brains use illusions to recreate the world. Everything is processed and abstracted, with the brain putting in a large amount of effort to organize, interpret, and fill in missing information based on past experience. For example, we know that there are circuits of the brain that are firing as if the illusory circle in the diagram was really there. That's why you see the invisible circle. What this means is that the brain considers the arrangement and decides that the only sensible explanation for the way each sphere seems to be missing a piece is because of the you circle in the middle. In other words, the brain hallucinates the experience of you by stimulating its own neural circuits to create that impression. It may be an illusion, but it is real as far as the brain is concerned. It's not magic, it's just basic neurophysiology describing how the pattern-seeking structures of the brain prefer order and create explanations. So why can't you see that you are a reflected self? For one thing, I absolutely can't forget to put this glasses footage. Glasses. No, that was a video from last night. But there's also the glasses. Okay, so why can't you see that you're a reflected self? For one thing, that view is inconsistent with the narrative that our brain generates, right? And if it works, right? So if the brain has this function of generating a narrative, but all that consists of is a little suggestion for a plot line, and there are other mechanisms that are going, hey, but that's just a suggestion, maybe that's not true, then it doesn't work. You don't believe the narrative. The narrative isn't believed. So if you're telling me that our brain evolved to have faith in or to be compelled by a narrative, or to construct a narrative that it uses, you're telling me that the brain constructs narratives that it uses, well, then that means that those narratives must be fucking compelling, because otherwise it wouldn't be able to use them. Because other parts of the brain would be like, no, I'm not sure that's actually the case. You feel me? Same thing with like social proof. We've got this great thing where stampeding, right? If one person sees something and reacts in a panicked way, everyone else follows. That only works if it works. It doesn't work if the process is like, oh, I noticed that everybody else is running, so I'm going to consider that information as to whether or not I should run. Now, I wonder why they're running. Is there like a right? It only works if it works. So if it works, how that looks is, holy fuck, there's something happening. We got to get the fuck out of here. And then if someone says, whoa, why do you think something's happening? It can't be, well, I'm not really sure, but there's a suggestion somewhere in my head that maybe we should get out of here. No, it's got to be because there's fucking people are dying over there. It only works if it works. And you are a part of the system. So it working means you believing it too. So the idea of the self, if it's not easy for you to dismiss, you have to remember, well, that it only works if it works. Meaning, the self-illusion only works if the whole brain is buying into it. And the whole brain can only buy into it if the whole brain thinks it has good reason to buy into it. So every time you it and you come up with a reason, what this feeling of consciousness? No shit, because it only works if it works. Okay, or you say, but what about the times when, yeah, everything that you're doing, all this, shut the fuck up. It only works if it works. So what we're wondering right now is whether you are programmed to believe in the self, not whether you're programmed to have a hunch that there might be a self, whether you are programmed to believe that there's a self. So all your naysaying here, well, it can actually just be proof of the fact that you are programmed to believe in it. You are showing me how committed you are to it. You understand? It only works if it works. You good, buddy? Only works if it works, bro. In other words, the brain, so why can't you see that you are a reflected self? Because it only works if it works. For one thing, that view is inconsistent with the narrative that our brain generates. Many of our thoughts and actions that we think reflect ourselves are not what they seem. We believe we have freedom to choose, but in many instances, the choices occur in the absence of any deliberation, and often under the influence of others. We are so dependent on maintaining our social inclusion that we readily conform to the will of the group, because we are our brains which create our sense of self. Because we are our brains, which create our sense of self, we have no privileged access to this invisible process from an outsider's perspective. One final mirror demonstration may leave you convinced that we are blind to how our brain creates our experience. Take a good, hard look at yourself in a mirror. Focus your gaze on your left eye and have a good look at it. It doesn't seem to be looking back at me. Have you done it yet? Do it. Do you need a pause? I'm moving on. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, half, 0. If you alternate your focus of gaze from the left eye to the right eye and back again, you cannot see your own eye movements from the left to the right and back again. Oh, I didn't do any switching. But now why does it look like it's not looking? Oh, now it does. Gosh, I don't think we perceive reality. Right. Oh, right. Remember Gerald Smallberg, The Wizard of Eye. Your eyes are moving. You can just not see them move. Ask someone else to do the same thing. Now you can easily see their eyes moving, but like you, they cannot see their own movements in the reflection in the mirror. This is because our brains deliberately, it's actually earlier. It's not like the whole brain, V-consciousness. It's some very bottom level process in the brain that inhibits the information from passing along to most of the brain. This is because our brains deliberately wipe out the visual experience of seeing the world every time we move our eyes. No, that's just straight up false. That's just straight up inaccurate. Gerald Smallberg phrased it better, but this is how knowledge works. I'm sorry. It sounds all complaining and critical, but this is how communication happens. So sorry. But no, that's just wrong. It is not that something receives the visual experience and then the brain as a single entity wipes out the information. Because if it had the information, then we had the information. Like, there is no occipital processing is what I'm trying to say. It's not like the occipital processes but then wipes it before it gets to consciousness. I'm pretty sure there's no occipital processing. And you know what you could look at, and you can comment on this because I'm not going to look at now, but you can look at an experiment where they flash a light during an eye movement and see whether the flash of light is processed. So it won't be processed consciously, whatever. But like, let's say, so you tell the subject to look from there to there, or from there to there, and during the look, in the middle, you flash a light. Do you see a reaction, galvanic skin response, or even just eye movement? Do they kind of look back there for a second? Is there some kind of latency? Is there like a stall or something? And then you'll know whether like the superior colliculus processes it. Oh fuck, wrong book. Because if the information gets to the soup call, then it's going to have, it's going to pull the eyes back to that thing. It's going to maybe jump or something, 285. Okay, consciousness is the fusion of immediate stimuli with memory that combines the simultaneous feeling of being both the observer and the observed into a smooth, enveloping flow of time that is neither truly the past nor the present, but somehow inexplicably each of them. It is the ultimate authority and arbiter of our perceptual reality. That consciousness is still an intractable problem for scientists and philosophers to understand is not surprising. Whatever the final answer turns out to be, I suspect it will be an illusion the mind evolved to hide the messy workings of its parallel modular computing. During the brief moments of these jerky eye movements, visual input to the brain is actively suppressed. Visual input to the brain is actively suppressed. It's not that the brain receives it and wipes it out. During the brief moments of these jerky eye movements, visual input to the brain is actively suppressed. We are literally blind. Without this involuntary ocular censorship, we would be repeatedly plagued with moments of acute blurred vision that would be unpleasant as well as unsafe. From a survival calculus, I'll let him do it. Okay. This is because our brains, false, deliberately wipe out the visual experience of seeing the world every time we move our eyes. You may be surprised to discover that you are effectively blind for about an average of 2 hours on every waking day, but you would never know this. This simple biological quirk is just one of the many different ways that our brain hides its true operations from our consciousness. Okay, you with me? You with me? Shut the fuck up otherwise. Are you with me? Okay, these were in about the same time. Gerald Smallberg gets it. He doesn't. Okay? Or at least you understand what I'm saying? Okay. We think we see a stable visual world, but in fact, it is constructed every time we move our eyes. In fact, unless you're paying close attention, we could switch objects in the room and you would never notice the change. This is because we assume that the world is stable, but that is an illusion. The self is the same. We cannot be aware of the underlying processes that create it, and yet we feel it is coherent. You never see that you are a reflection of the others around you because you cannot easily see how you change. And we don't easily see ourselves switching from one to another until it is pointed out to us by those around us, or we recognize that the context has changed. At the danger of overextending the metaphor, if we were able to see the world during our eye movements, we would become nauseous because it would become unstable and we would experience motion sickness. The world would smear as the visual input stimulated the neurons that process the light. Here, too much information can be a bad thing. So our brain protects us, false, from the true nature of the situation. Maybe this is why we do not see the cognitive illusions that create the self. Cognitive dissonance protects us from ruminating over failed goals. Positive biases keep us motivated. Free will gives us grounds for praise and blame. Decision-making gives us the illusion of control. Without these cognitive illusions, we would not be able to function, false, because we would be overwhelmed. Without these cognitive illusions, well, I mean, not all of them. You don't need the cognitive illusion of free will and all of that. What cognitive illusion are you actually talking about? Potter's biases keep us motivated, but that doesn't have anything to do with us being overwhelmed by the true complexity of the hidden processes and mechanisms that control us. I'm not overwhelmed. I'm not overwhelmed, and nobody's gonna tell me that people get overwhelmed and that's why they're not learning it. No, it's just because I'm out of fear. It's overwhelmed. It's not complicated, ma. Something doesn't have to be complicated to be difficult for a brain to process. Okay? And in fact, some things are super, super complicated and bullshit and very easy for the brain to process. We all pretty much have the same sense of what an all-powerful, all-knowing single God would be. I mean, we're never like, oh my gosh. And then he thought of God as this way, and I didn't understand that at all. And so he's been explaining it to me over the last few weeks, and I'm starting to get it. No. If you hear someone talk about God in a new way, you're like, oh my gosh, and then he put it this way, and I felt that. Like, that was so, like, that was it. That was like the perfect way to put it. Anyway, without these cognitive illusions, we would not be able to function because we would be overwhelmed by the true complexity of the hidden processes and mechanisms that control us, that are us. You're losing me, Hood. And that, in the end, is a good thing. What of the future of this self-illusion? It's unlikely to disappear. It is an evolved adaptation, after all, but it may have to change. Currently, the world's population is just under 7 billion. Within the next generation, the United Nations estimates that the majority of us will be living in a mega city, metropolitan areas with a density of at least 2,000 people per square kilometer and at least 10 million inhabitants. The expansion of the internet means that the majority of the world's population will have the potential to communicate with each other. Instantaneous language translation is just around the corner and will further erode another barrier to communication. These developments are a far cry from the Serengeti savannas where our ancestors first appeared. One can speculate how changes will impact upon the individual's identity, but it would seem that in an ever more crowded future, we're going to need a pretty strong sense of self to survive. That's your final message? No. No. No, 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 no. No, thank goodness we're reading No Self, No Problem. No, 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 no. We want people to have critical recognition. Oh, no, 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 no. We don't need we want people to learn about decision making. Or about the things that motivate them, that blah blah blah. No, sorry. Okay. If we break up into tribes, and people like live like normal human lives, farming, writing, hunting, gathering, firing, spiritual dancing, okay. They can they don't technically need critical recognition, really. Critical recognition is only necessary because of the situation we're in now.